All right. Awesome. So that is the video. Thank you all. Uh, Thanks everyone for staying to watch that. And now what we can do is we've got Karen here with us. So maybe Karen, you can unmute yourself and we can kind of start our Q&A. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hello to each and every one of you. Happy Wednesday morning. I'm delighted to be here with you. Yeah, so I was in the video, the outdoorsy version of me. I'm indoors today in my home office. And yeah, we filmed at Sandy Lake Regional Park, which is an awesome city park that you can go to. And then we filmed at Ecology Action Center, which is the office where I work part of the time. So yeah, I welcome your questions today about Sandy Lake Park, the kinds of things I work on as an environmental activist, or maybe some of the things I learned in school that got me here or that I found really interesting about biology.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have any questions, you can just type them in the chat. And yeah, we'll just be going from there. So maybe just take a minute, think of your questions, get them in there. And meanwhile, Karen, what did you think of the video? I know, you got to see an early edit of it, but we did a lot of filming together and that's what made the cut.
Yeah, that was fun and cold. So props to you, Jonah, for going outside on a cold day, and then we were inside. Yeah, but Sandy Lake always delivers. It's a beautiful park. I highly recommend it for everyone. And Ecology Action Center, the office, is always so cool to be in. There's all these like funky features in the office. So I'm glad you got to see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't quite make the video this time just because it would have been a 25-minute video, but we did get a ton of footage of the actual building and we got a little tour. So maybe in the future there'll be another virtual field trip just focusing on all the cool stuff that we have done, or that you've done, I guess, with the space. But yeah, Sandy Lake is a really awesome place, and I know there is a school here who mentioned that they are not far from Sandy Lake. They're right in Bedford, so I think some of the students will recognize it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we're still waiting for some questions in the chat. And yeah, one of the questions, we can start with this one. Was that fun? So is it do you have fun at your job, Karen? Is it a fun time?
Yeah, it is. It's great to work with like-minded people who have similar values and similar interests. One thing I can tell you is last night we did a craftivism event, which is activism through making crafts. So we went to this art space called Wonderneath that had all these tables and all these arts and crafts stuff. And we made Valentines for Sandy Lake. And people made all these beautiful and funny and punny Valentines about how much they love Sandy Lake. And then the Valentines are going to get delivered to one of the decision makers at Sandy Lake, one of the politicians in charge of the area. So it's like a way to express what you want in a really like beautiful, nice way. So those are the kinds of things I get to do at Ecology Action Center. So it is a lot of fun and meaningful as well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. How would people find out about those kinds of events, the craftivism and things like that?
Yeah, so Ecology Action Center is always hosting all different kinds of events around like biking together or come see the kelp farm that we created. So we have like an e-newsletter that people can get in their email addresses, or all the different social media channels where we announce things sometimes. So we're always doing things that relate to the environment, and lots of them are for the public, for anybody to drop by and do.
Okay, awesome. We've got another question here from Laura Weber. It was, do different types of trees have different natural lifespans?
Yeah, interestingly, so some of our trees are experts at coming in when an area has just been destroyed or cleared or at the side of the road and is like really sunny, and they can grow faster than all the other trees. So some trees that are like that are red maples. But other trees specialize in like growing slowly in the shade. And like that takes a lot of effort. You have to be able to do it as a tree without a lot of sunlight, but then they can grow to a really old age, especially if they survive all of the insect challenges and all of the hurricanes and stuff. So our oldest lived tree species that we know of is called Eastern hemlock. And we have some really old Eastern hemlock at Sandy Lake Park and in our old growth forests of Nova Scotia. So they can live, we know, to 200 or 300 years old, but in theory, they could live to 800 years old. but nobody has ever seen that or kept records long enough to know that, but that's possible. So we should keep an eye on the ones that we have right now that are like 250 years old and keep watching them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned when we were there, we saw some of the hemlock, the kind of in Sandy Lake Park, and I've been to Keji where they have the old growth hemlock as well, and those trees are massive. Do you know how old those ones are out in Keji?
Yeah, some of them are more than 100 or 200 years old, which is kind of crazy to think about all the things they would have lived through over those years, and they kept going and they kept growing and they kept fighting things off. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are some amazing trees in Keji. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I guess sort of a follow-up also from Laura Weber's classes. Do you know the average age of the oldest tree in Sandy Lake right now? Or like what's the sort of, makeup of the trees
Yeah,
there?
there's like a couple old growth forest stands. So that's like a small section of the forest that you can stand in. And we've had some people with like professional forester experience do a tree core, which is where
Okay.
you hand drill like a tiny little hallway in the tree and then take out a little core of the tree and then count the rings under a microscope. And every 2 rings counts as 1 year of growth. So it's a way to
Wow.
find out the age of the tree. So we did that in 3 old forest stands to find out how old are the biggest trees there. So the one, Jonah, that we were in, that stand is about 125 years old in the biggest trees. And then
Okay.
if you go up the lake into another forest, it's about 130. And then if you go over the hill into this glorious big old forest, the oldest trees there are 140 years old.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So the kind of the further back you go, more old growth and
Yeah.
they've been sort of there a longer time. That's awesome. Um, we've got a question from Ms. Tracy Cochran's class, a question from Addison is what is your favorite part of Sandy Lake?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so much neat stuff there. I can't narrow it down to one thing. I could probably narrow it down to like one thing per season. 2 things I can tell you that you could go and see there if you wanted is in the springtime in like late April. So let's say like around April 22nd, like around Earth Day. On warm, wet nights, there are these salamanders that come out of the ground and they're yellow spotted salamanders. So they're black with big yellow dots and they're about the length of a hot dog. And they live underground like 99% of the year. And on warm, wet April nights, they come out of the ground and they find little pools and they lay their eggs in the pool and then they go back underground for the rest of the year. So if you
Wow.
go there in the nighttime with a headlamp, you can see these salamanders come out of the ground, which is super cool. And then another thing that's really neat a couple months later is American toads. So like when you see a toad in the forest, that species is called an American toad. They live in the forest most of the time, but like other amphibians, they have to come down to the water to lay their eggs. So they come down to Sandy Lake, and they lay their eggs in the corner of Sandy Lake, and then the eggs turn into tadpoles. And then around July 6th, the tadpoles have transformed into tiny toads that are only like about a centimeter or 2. And they all come out of the lake at the same time. And it's like an army of tiny toads pass
Tiny
through the
little,
park. And you have to like stand there and watch as they go by and go up to live their lives in the forest. So there's these neat kind of like major animal movements within the park that are one of my favorite things.
yeah, and the fact that it's so close to Halifax, a lot of people wouldn't associate, all of that nature and all of these kind of amazing things happening, being so close to the city, right? So that's
Yeah.
really, really awesome. We've got another question from Ali. Karen, are frogs still your favorite animal?
Oh, I've learned about so many animals over the decades. Again, I can't pick just one. I mean, I still love frogs, the frog species of Nova Scotia, and amphibians. I would say I'm also learning more about birds, and there
Mm,
is like a rare species of bird you can see at Sandy Lake. That's probably my favorite bird species right now, called common nighthawk. And it's a really cool bird with like long pointy wings, and they can dive really fast, and they fly in a really flappy way, almost like a bat, and they make a whooshing sound. So they're just like very attention getting. And sometimes when I'm at Sandy Lake, I see them flying around.
okay, wow, that's awesome. I know, I guess a lot of the people who live close to Sandy Lake will be looking out for, what are they called, common nighthawks?
Common nighthawks, yeah.
Okay, yeah, keep your eyes peeled, everyone who lives nearby. Awesome. We've got another question. What is the most common animal or amphibian in Sandy Lake? From Anaya.
Oh, that's an excellent question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know where we could go to get that answer. is there is an app called iNaturalist, which anybody can get for free and use. And it takes nature observations. So like if we were on a field trip at Sandy Lake Park, we could like take a picture of a frog or a salamander and add it to iNaturalist. And then that creates like a database or a list of every species that's been found by everybody there ever. So we could go into that and find out what is coming up the most and what's coming up the least and what areas of the park have been checked. So this is part of a really important piece to do, because we can go to the park right now, it's free, it's public, and we can find out what's there. What's happening is that on the other side of the lake that also has old growth forest and wetlands and frogs and salamanders and common nighthawks, that area is proposed to be destroyed to make roads and houses and stuff. So it's really important for us to gather information and say, before you do that, think about all the things that are here and how they could be impacted. And if you're going to go ahead with it, how could you change things to reduce the impact on these different species? So always important to gather those nature observations and figure out what are the things there that we have to try to plan for.
Yeah, so kind of crowdsourcing that information, right? Anyone can download the app, go for a walk, take a picture, and then you are, adding to the database and like giving people that information that they need.
Yeah, one of the super fun things about iNaturalist and ways that you learn is you don't have to know what the thing is. You just take a picture of it. Like if you've ever seen like a butterfly or an insect and you don't know it, when you use iNaturalist and take a picture, it records it and it also identifies it for you.
Okay.
So I've actually learned a lot of stuff through there from taking pictures of interesting looking things, and then it tells me what it is.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. And bet that would be a lot of fun just going through the forest and taking pictures of stuff. And it's like, it's a this or it's a that kind of like, that's awesome. Right, well, we've got a few more questions here. Another one from Laura Weber's class. What tip would you give someone who is interested or inspired in doing what you do?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I got to follow my passion. So I was always really passionate and loved learning about nature. And then I got to do that through school, and then I get to do that through my job. But I mean, you can't always get a job doing what you love and what you're passionate about. So I think you have to like try to find a balance in life. Like I got started having jobs as a teenager. I worked in a bakery and I worked at Sport Check. So I love nature, but sometimes you have to do something else for a bit, and then you can start to do more of the things that you are really passionate about. But I was always like learning about nature or volunteering in nature or just like trying to get ahead, even if it wasn't my main job. So anybody today, like anybody, could start learning more about nature and like building the resume and getting a good reason why they would be able to get a job in nature conservation later.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired by that, and really, really great advice, right? Anything you're interested in doing, if you just start doing it, then you will have experience and you can say, I've been doing this for a long time. Yeah, that's awesome. Another question. How do we get on the Ecology Action Center volunteer list?
Great. Yeah. Well, what I can leave with Jonah is an email or a website. Ecology Action Center is the name of where I work. And on that website, you can click to be on this email list where they send out email tasks like, could you help with this? Could you research this? Could you learn about this? Could you come to this event? And then anybody can do that. They don't have to. It's just anybody can be like, actually, I could do that this Saturday. I could come to that event. So it's just anybody can do the things that we're asking for help for.
Okay, awesome. I think I get the emails every once in a while still of like, we need people for this, or if you want to do this. So it's always nice if you've got a free day to just be like, oh yeah, I could head up to do that thing. Yeah. Great. I guess maybe we'll give people another minute or so. If they have any last questions for Karen, you can throw them in the chat. Now is the time. And I guess while we wait for that, I have a question, Karen. Is there anything, we've talked a lot about Sandy Lake, and, we saw the video, and you're, really giving us lots of awesome little tidbits of information about all the different life and trees and stuff there. I guess outside of Sandy Lake, like what are some other places, if people don't live close to Sandy Lake, if they live in other parts of the HRM, or, this presentation might be going to people who live in other parts of Nova Scotia, what are maybe some of your favorite places outside of Sandy Lake or in the province in general that people should check out? Yeah,
somewhere that is places that are really wild and really cool and free to go to are the protected areas, the wild places called wilderness areas in Nova Scotia. So you can just look up Nova Scotia wilderness areas, and there's more than 70 of them, and they're all over Nova Scotia, and they're wild places for people and nature. So you can go there and camp or hike or swim or whatever, and it's free and it's taken care of forever. So all over Nova Scotia, there are wilderness areas that people can go to. And if you want to go to places, but you're like not so sure about going there and hiking and where the trails are and stuff like that, then there's organizations you can join or even just like try out. So one that I belong to that showed me a lot of interesting places is Hike Nova Scotia. So they organize hikes all over, and then you can go with people that already know the place and find out where the trails are and stuff like that, and then you can go back on your own. So that was a good intro to a whole bunch of different places in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a great way to meet people who are interested in the same stuff, right? So that you can get a hiking buddy when you need one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got a few more questions that have rolled in from Laura Weber's class. What is the coolest thing you have explored or found while in the woods?
Oh, neat. I've been so fortunate to do so much field work. Before I worked at Ecology Action Center, I worked as a conservation biologist for 11 years somewhere else in Nova Scotia, and I also got to travel around and see cool stuff. There was one day that I was up on the St. Mary's River, which is up in Guysborough County, so amazing forest up there, and there's a really rare animal there called wood turtle. So it's like a turtle. It mostly lives in the woods and not in the water. It's orange under its neck and arms. Very interesting turtle, but very rare and very secretive, like hard to see on the forest floor. And so I was in the woods by myself. I was like checking out this property, making my way across it, and there was a pond, and it was really thick woods. And the only way to get across the pond was to walk on a log, like balance on a log across the pond. And so I was like, I might fall in and get injured, but I'm going to go for it instead. So I was walking across the log, and as I reached the other end, there was like a shaft of light, and at the bottom of the light on the forest floor was a wood turtle looking up at me. And I was like, like, wow, it's like greeting me there. And I'm so glad I went across this log and saw it. So that was like a really magical experience in the woods on the St. Mary's River. Yeah.
Yeah, you cross the log, and the shaft of light comes down the turtle, and he says, "You have to answer my riddles to get past me."
Yeah, very magical moment. Yeah,
that's awesome. We've got a question from Katie. What are some changes? This is actually a great question. I didn't even think of this. What are some changes you've noticed or seen from climate change in your job?
Yeah, excellent question. So I've been working in Nova Scotia for 19 years now, which has been long enough to see changes in the forest from climate change and in wetlands. I would say one of the changes I've seen is the increase in certain invasive species. So species that aren't from here, that have been accidentally introduced here and are now taking off, and the populations are getting out of control because there's no predators here to get them. So I am seeing an insect that's coming more and more, and all of us are going to see more of in the province, unfortunately, called hemlock woolly adelgid, or the hemlock vampire, that kills hemlock trees. So that was not here before, and now it's here. And now the more I work in different parts of Nova Scotia, the more I see gray dead hemlocks because of that invasive species. So climate change, one of the things it's doing really quickly in Nova Scotia is making our winters warmer. Really quickly, quicker than normal. And those insects would normally be killed badly. Like the population would go way down in the winter, but when our winters aren't as cold, then the insect population keeps doing better and better. So those are going to move up Nova Scotia really quickly now and possibly kill most of our hemlock trees. So yeah, the research shows that climate change is accelerating the spread of invasive insects.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it doesn't feel like the winters are getting colder when we've had the last 2 weeks that we've had, but it is a great point. Like, I remember the winters were much longer and much colder, even, 10 years ago. So I can definitely see how, the insects are pretty happy that they're not getting frozen out of home, right? Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think probably our last question for the day, and this might go back into what we just talked about, but maybe not. What is the most commonly found tree in Sandy Park, in Sandy Lake Park, or in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, I mean, we have more than 30 trees, species in Nova Scotia, and almost all of them can be found at Sandy Lake because it's a really biodiverse place, has a lot of different species. I'd
Okay.
probably have to go to iNaturalist to say the most common one for sure.
Hmm.
But one of the trees that's very common in Nova Scotia that you can find there is Nova Scotia's provincial tree, our official tree of Nova Scotia, which is the red spruce. So
Okay.
that's a really cool tree to see. It has a really interesting biology and cultural history, and you can see that right off the trail in lots
Mhm.
of places in Sandy Lake. So definitely look for red spruce when you're at that park.
Okay. And was red spruce the tree that we talked about you could make tea out of?
Yeah, so red spruce and a couple other spruce trees. If you know what you're doing and if you know the
Mm.
population there and are respectful towards it, then you can harvest, you can cut a little bit of it and make a tea. And it's healthy and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the plants in Nova Scotia that you can eat if you know about it.
Yes, yeah. You definitely don't want to just go up to a random tree that you don't recognize and say, I think this is a red spruce, and start pulling branches off in boiling water. Yeah,
No,
definitely
you
want
got
to
to
know
get
what
to
you're
know it,
doing.
but then it's really cool once you get to know it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, and we do have another question from Jennifer Bradley. What can young people do to promote environmental action in their rural communities? Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So in rural communities, I hear from people in rural communities all the time, all over Nova Scotia. I hear from people that there are places that they love, like wild forests that they've been going to for years, that are now going to change. They're going to be eliminated because of something. And a lot of the decisions about who is, like, whether it gets destroyed or not, are the people who are in charge of that are the MLAs, the members of the Legislative Assembly, so the local provincial person who's in charge. So
Mhm.
people can go for walks with their MLA in places they love and talk about, is there an alternative future here? Like, does this have to be destroyed, or could it
Mhm.
stay wild for all of those benefits? So, if you're in like downtown Halifax, it can be really hard to meet up with your MLA, your provincial person. They're really busy. They're always in meetings. They're hard to get to. But people who live in rural communities can often meet with their MLA or see them at the grocery store or see them in church or like see them walking down the road. So
Mhm.
the advantage for people in rural communities is that you're closer, you're more easily able to meet with the people in charge and say, let's take a walk in this place I love because I heard there's a big decision coming up to destroy it, and what areas are we protecting in our area, because you have to do that everywhere. So yeah, really possible to access decision makers, including going outside with them when you live in a rural community.
Okay. And is there something specifically that maybe like younger people can do as well? Like it might be maybe they don't know their MLA or they're still in school or things like that. So maybe like organizing in their school or doing things like that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've seen rural schools do that has been really insightful for them is do water quality testing in a lake or
Mm.
river near the school. So you can see, like, is it a healthy river or lake for us to swim in and for aquatic creatures to live in? And then you have that record there. And if something is threatening that lake or river, like right upstream from it, there's going to be a big gravel pit or a big mine. You can say, okay, well, our school and I have gathered all this data, this information about the health of the river or lake. Is this going to
Mhm.
be used in decision making? Or how will we make sure that it stays the same and stays healthy if this thing goes ahead? So anybody can do water quality testing, and you can usually get the equipment for free. And then you have scientific data that could be used by people in charge. So you could be any age and collecting that, and it would be helpful.
Okay, wow, that's awesome to know. And yeah, that's a really great point, right? Talking to your MLA and that, the elected officials, they work for the people, right? So if you're not happy about something, definitely bring it up with them and yeah, that's awesome advice.
Excellent.
Um, and I think we've got about 15 minutes left in the meeting, but so if there are any last questions, you can send them in. But we do have one more here, again from Laura Webb's class. Have you ever experienced a scary moment in the woods?
Hmm. I spend a lot of time in the woods alone in Nova Scotia, and I never had any bad incidences. I had some interesting ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of them was I was deep in the woods. It was a day that was like rainy sometimes and not other times. And I had rain gear on and my rubber boots. And I was taking a break by a tree. I was using my GPS to decide where to go next. And I saw a baby porcupine come down from a tree and slowly walk over to me. And I was like, oh, how's this going to go? Because it's a porcupine, so I shouldn't touch it. And they don't usually come towards you. But then again, it's a super cute baby. So is it like lost? I didn't understand what's happening. And then it came all the way over to me and I didn't move. And it sniffed my boot. And then I realized I had peed in the woods earlier and I got some of the pee on my boot. And now my boot smelled like pee. And that was interesting to the baby porcupine. It came down to like check me out. So I like backed away slowly. And then the baby porcupine walked back to the tree that it lived in and left. So that was like a really bizarre but amazing wildlife experience that I've had. Yeah, and I've had other ones where I found like bear scat. I found a dead eel once. Yeah, just it's super interesting in the woods in Nova Scotia. But I've never had like a bad or dangerous experience there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, animals are curious too, right? They if something is new for them, then they want to check it out and see what's going on. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is awesome. I think that is everything for today. But thank you again so much, Karen. This has been awesome to, it was awesome to shoot the video with you and learn more about Sandy Lake. And I mean, I hope, I know people are going to really appreciate all of the answers that you've given today, because I'm inspired to go into the woods and, see a little bit more on what's around me. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We gotta, take action, save these wild places, because it's not like we're making any more, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, thanks everyone for coming to the virtual field trip. We hope you had a great time. We hope you learned something. And yes, I will send out a follow-up email with that information about where you can join the volunteer list. And if you have any other questions, you can send them to me or to Angie, and you can check out the Ecology Action Center's website. But yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you again, Karen, and we will hopefully chat with you all soon.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.